Today, I am very honored to have my guest, April Remfrey, who is a new friend, colleague, and just a wonderful resource when it comes to helping parents and really approach schools and understand schools and investigate which schools could best support their kids. She's just a wealth of knowledge. And I'm super excited to have her here today to answer some questions for us and help us, because as parents, I feel going to schools, especially when our kids are having challenges, it is challenging, and coming away feeling good about the meeting and that our kids are being supported. And there's just a lot of things going on when we are really working with schools, especially when our kids are having a hard time at school. And so April is here to give us some wonderful tips on how to support us parents and how we can support our kids in school and work with the school to have everyone on the same page and leave feeling good and feeling like there's a good relationship between parents, kids, and the school. So April, if you wouldn't mind sharing with us a couple, just a little tidbits about yourself and how you started on this journey.
Sure. Hi. Thanks for having me, Elizabeth. I really appreciate it. I have been a special needs and general education teacher for the last 22 years. I am from the US in Iowa and have lived in the Midwest and Seattle area, and now for the last 8 years have lived in Switzerland with my husband and our now 16-year-old daughter. So this whole process for me, now that I'm out of the classroom and doing this consulting work, has been really eye-opening and enjoyable, working with families on their side, but also working with schools and helping everybody understand how you can meet each other in the middle. And we all have the same thing in mind, and we're all reaching towards the same goal, but how to do that in a way that makes everybody comfortable is a struggle. And you know that as a parent, I know that as a parent, but we both all sat on the other side of the table too. And sometimes you need somebody in the middle just to say, hey, this is what the parents are thinking. Hey, this is what the teachers are thinking. And that's really where this is coming from today.
Thank you. And you're right. I am an occupational therapist, and I've been on the other side of the IEP meetings before kids. And, I never looked at it from the parent side as far as, when I'm sharing the challenges that the child's having, I'm looking at it as I'm bringing to light some of the challenges that we want to help the child with. So to me, bringing those challenges up was never an issue, because we all have challenges. And so I didn't think of it as something bad, because we all have our obstacles. And when we identify them, it's even better, because then we can help to adapt or overcome to them, of these challenges. But then when I was the parent sitting on the other side, hearing all the things that my child couldn't do, that's hard.
Yeah. I hear you. This is why I wear a scarf, because when I get nervous or one of my ideas are being challenged, or we're talking about something that my daughter struggles with, my face just goes shoo. And I learned from a grad school professor, and it was the most amazing advice that I have taken with me forever. I make a joke about it, because it lightens everything up, because everybody's watching me go crazy red, right? So I just say, this is just my nervous Norwegian skin saying hello. But it breaks the ice, and then it makes me feel a little bit better. Everybody has a little laugh, and then we can kind of move on. So that's my scarf trick.
I like that, because I know my husband just watches me in one of these meetings, and he's like, "Oh, when is she gonna go?" Because he knows those signs when I'm like, keep holding it in, and then all of a sudden it's So
Mom.
you bring humor into it. So that kind of helps. I like that. That eases the emotions that you're feeling at that moment.
Yeah, it really does for me. And my other strategy before I get to the meeting, speaking of emotions, is I tell my husband what I'm hoping to say. We talk it through, but I'm kind of the leading that conversation. But I need him to know what I'm going to say because I'm inevitably going to cry. I never did this on the teacher side of the table, but when it's your own child, the emotions are just so raw and they're right there at the surface. And it really makes me feel better that when I can't get the words out, my husband can continue on with what we had planned on saying. So it makes me also feel better to have a plan going in, and that where I know that we're a team and he can take over when I lose it.
I like that. I like that. That is good. I like that. My husband and I have had code words for things. When a certain word is, that means I need you to take over, because mentally,
Yeah.
if I talk, it's not gonna be good. I like that. That is really good.
Yeah.
And I like that team approach, because sometimes it's just moms that come in. It's just us, and that
Yeah. And
very
if you can't take your spouse with you, take another advocate. Right? So it doesn't have to be someone you pay. It can be a friend. It can be a therapist that your kid works with, that you have a very good relationship with. And speaking of bringing things, I always advocate for bringing cookies or something, just because as soon as you get sugar or chocolate or something in people's bellies, for some reason, it brings the whole mood back a little bit, and we're all relating to each other in food, instead of the only thing you have to relate to each other is your child. And that's when you're all anxious. So bring some cookies, say, oh, these are my best American chocolate chip cookies, thought you might want to try them. It sets the tone as conciliatory. You're there to relate onto it on a different level. And over those cookies, maybe you can say, hey, I'm feeling really anxious about this meeting today because there's some really big outcomes that are going to happen after this meeting. So while you're having the cookies and enjoying it, you can explain where you're at that moment. You've got your scarf, you've got your plan with whoever you brought with you, and now you're telling them how you're feeling. And you're giving them the option to meet you where you are, which is what teachers are kind of trained to do, but you have to tell them where you are. And it doesn't always feel comfortable, but it gives them the opportunity to bring it down a little bit.
I love that, expressing how you feel, because some of us, this may be the third time we're meeting the school, but if it's the first time, and this is the first time you're hearing that there is something going on with your child that requires a meeting, even just the fear of unknown, there's so many unknowns as you're going in, and to open that door saying, I'm nervous to hear these unknowns. It opens the human part of it, so they can, they can address the human side. Because I think sometimes we look at our, when I've been on the other side, we look at our scores, and there was a great video that I saw from a fellow occupational therapist who had just left an IEP meeting. And, a lot of times they're just going over these scores and comparing these scores and addressing, and it's so hard on parents, because we want our kids to be smart. We want our kids to be the best. And in hearing that, it can just be, and the hard thing is I love our school where my kids are now, because they show all sides of intelligence. It's, the PYP, the MYP, and they don't focus on just one side of intelligence. There's so many aspects, which I love. And unfortunately in school, we tend to just look at the math, the reading, and the academic portion, which is a tiny snapshot of a child. And so really bringing that emotion to it and saying, I'm a human being with emotions, please be gentle, this is how I'm feeling, is such a great segue. So they know this when they're talking to make sure they're addressing those emotions and being mindful of those emotions, and not just being mindful of those scores and whatnot.
Exactly. And even if you don't get that out at the beginning of the meeting, it's okay to say in the middle, hey, I need to take a little break. I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. Can we take a 5-minute break here? And that, again, is giving you time to breathe and to reset, but also it's given a hint to the other people on the other side of the table that, oh, I need to check how I'm presenting this information because I'm making them really uncomfortable. And we can see that as teachers. We just think, oh, we need to get through it. We have an hour. But you really do need to say where you're at, because when this part of your brain has gotten too many things that are overwhelming, it's not talking to the rest of your brain anymore. And it's okay to say to them, this is too much at the moment. Can we take a small break? Or, another strategy that I give parents is can we record this part on my phone or whatever, because I'm hearing you, but I'm not really comprehending at the moment. So I want to be able to come back and listen to this. So, and most of the time schools are going to say, sure, that's no problem, especially if you say it's because I'm really overwhelmed with everything that's being said. Can I record this to come back to it later?
I think that's wonderful. I really like that idea. So now addressing it from, like I said, I've been on the other side of IEP meetings where I'm testing kids and I'm presenting the results as an occupational therapist. But I've also been on the other side as a mom with my 2 children having challenges in school. And oftentimes I feel as parents, when we hear our kids can't do something, we're like, well, what are they doing wrong? And so we're automatically not seeing how can I help my child. We're saying, well, they're not doing it right. And we're wanting to shift because it's hard to accept that our kids have challenges sometimes. And and I know the schools sometimes too. I mean, they're looking at saying, okay, this kid's having challenges, and sometimes they're going to want to shift the blame, like it's the parents not. So, I mean, there are 2 sides to, and having, shifting blame on either side is not going to help anyone, because then everyone's taking it out of their court on how to help this child. They're saying it's your way, you have to do something, and then guess what? Nothing's being done. So when we come to the school, my main focus, once I learned to control my emotions a little more and really came from a place up here rather than here, learn to integrate both, is really coming at it saying, well, I can bring this to the table. What can you bring to the table? So we're both coming at it, helping the child. So I've learned to acknowledge on my part what I can do, because then it's saying, well, I'm doing my part. What can you do? Right. I mean, what advice could you give us to ensure, one, that parents, like, we're okay? I think we have to be okay that our kid, and being acknowledged that maybe they do need help, and not, because I've seen that, and it doesn't help anyone, right? Like when but it's, what can you say about that, how we can approach both from the school and from the parent side?
Well, number one, I would say presume competence from both sides of the table. Presume competence, number one, and presume that everyone has the child at the center of this conversation, right? That's number 2. But number 3, and I think this is a really big one, is stick to the facts. Because in that moment, the emotions are high. That's a given. But if you stick to the facts, where is the area that your child isn't performing well in? Okay, great. Where are they right now? Where do we want them to get to? How are we going to do that? There are no I feel statements in there. And I feel statements have a place. They really do. But when you're discussing your child's progress and how you're going to help them meet goals, they have 0 place. Saying, I feel like Elizabeth is not making progress in reading. What does that mean? It doesn't help the situation, and it doesn't help. Or I feel like you are not doing enough to help Elizabeth to make progress. Okay, in that moment, those aren't helpful statements. What we need to do is go back to the facts, and we need to get really logical about it, which can be annoying on one side too. But when you try to take part of that emotion away and you get to the facts, it can bring the situation back to the center of what does the student need, which is really why you're all there.
So I like that. So I feel she's not reading to the capacity she needs to. I see that she's struggling in this. How can we help? What can be done? Or maybe not what can be done? Because I felt too when I was going in there, like I had to do everything because it was my kid, and there's a team approach, right? And so
and acknowledging that I don't have all the answers as the parent. I might not have all the answers as the teacher either, and we have to figure this out together. So we're going to have to systematically figure this out. We're not going to go willy-nilly shooting in the dark. So what is the plan? And then again, we're coming back to the facts to create a plan together. And that when you're making a plan, everybody has a role in the plan. So then you can all feel more like a team. I'm going to do this. You're going to do that. And then you can say, okay, and then we're going to check back in 2 weeks. So set a time frame too.
I like that. One thing when you were talking, I said, a thought popped in my mind of just going in there and just saying to myself, I'm a good mom, because I think we sometimes think anything that our kids do that we don't feel maybe is, good or the best, or, we take it on, we take their struggles on, we take their pain on. And I think removing that guilt of maybe our kids can't do something and taking that in. So going into, because I feel like that's where the emotions come from, is that guilt we feel or shame that our kids can't do something.
Absolutely.
That we attach to our role as a parent. And so when you were saying that, the first thing about, with taking the emotions out, I thought, all right, what a great thing to go in and say, I'm an awesome parent, like prep yourself up. And I'm here to help my kid. They're here to help my kid. All right, what can we do to help my kid and take us out of it? And I think that's.
But you also brought up something really important, is to say out loud, I know that you have my child's best interest at heart. Because I think teachers need to hear that also. And even if you don't 100% believe it, it's good to put that out there, because then it keeps the trust going back and forth between you and the school. Because that's one of the hardest things, is when trust is lost because something wasn't done the way you expected on either side of the table, right? Is trying to reestablish that trust by saying those affirming statements. I know you're here to do what's best for my kid. I can feel that from you. Now, I've told you how I feel about you. Let's move back to the facts. But the point being, saying those things out loud is okay. Saying how you feel right in that moment is okay. Telling them that you feel like you're moving towards working as a team and they have your kid's best interests at heart. How much that's just going to create such a good relationship. And that's really the goal, isn't it? When you know that both parties are working towards the same goal, you're going to achieve more. It's a given.
I love how you put that. And that is so true. You have to work together and you have to trust each other. And I like that. And, it is showing them that you trust them, lets them step up to the plate to show you why. It opens that door where if you come in and say, you don't know my kid, I don't trust you, then they're going to be like, well, what is there to prove? They don't trust me. They don't, and so making that path from the start, saying, I know you have my kid's best interest, opens that door to really have them step in and say, all right, I do feel I can do this, because teachers, that's hard too. You have so many kids, so many different personalities. And I always said nurses and teachers are the two hardest demanding jobs ever.
Right.
And underpaid too, which, but
yes. Yeah.
we won't go into that.
Yeah.
So
I was just going to say too, that I think that the other thing you can do, not just in words, and tell them that you feel like you're on the same page together, you're on the same team, but make sure your body language also conveys
Mhm.
that. Um, which is easier said than done, because I have one of those faces that gives everything away. I have to try so hard to not make faces when I don't agree with someone. And so I know that about myself, but we teachers are super keen on watching what people's body language is, and because we have to do that with kids all the time, and what's going on in the face. They're going to watch your body language, and if what you're saying doesn't match what they're seeing, they'll be confused.
Well, and that's too, because I think sometimes as parents, we do feel we know our kids the best. And honestly, we do. We've raised these kids, but teachers are coming from a different lens. And so, yes, we may know our kids the best, but in a classroom setting, the teacher is going to know our kids best in that setting. And I think we have to separate that and know that, because sometimes parents are like, well, they don't know they're my kid, and just kind of shut that wall and say, well, I know them best. And I think there's that difference between the teacher knowing your child and the desire to helping them. Do you see what I'm saying? I think sometimes we think you don't know what to do to help my child, and we're putting that as in you don't know how to help my child. Does that make sense? And
Yep.
I think the meeting is there for them to see how they can best help, and they may not have all the answers, and it may be a trial and error till we feel the best program for the child comes about. But I think we hold teachers on this high level sometimes, and then we just say, how can you help us with that? Like, separate. Do you see what I'm saying? Like that separating.
Yeah.
You do know your child the best, but in that setting, we have to be open for the teachers to bring their side in, and being in that side, knowing that they are the experts in that.
Right. And I think as parents, you've done a really good job if your child acts one way at home and acts a different way at school. Right? Because it's like when I was a kid going to church, I was a completely different person when my mom made me sit in the pew for an hour and I was practicing my handwriting so I could zone out what was going on up there. But it's what happens at school too. Our kids have a school personality, just like we have our work personality. And so they have a different way of being at home. And that's not a bad thing, but acknowledging and understanding the fact that you don't sit in that classroom all day long and watch your kids to see how it is that they perform. So that's why you have to work with the teachers. We have to hear everybody's perspective. And if the teachers aren't listening to your perspective about what's going on with your kids at home, I think that's something important to point out and say, hey, I really need to hear from you how my child is at school. And I think it's really important that you know how he or she is at home so we can really create a 360-degree view of this child.
I like how you said that, because the best experiences my kids have had are when I can email the teacher that day and say, my son's having a morning, beware. I've always prepped them to know, so they can be ready and on alert to make sure my child, they're keeping an extra eye out on him. And it's been, sometimes they're like, well, he was an angel today. I'm like, hey, but sometimes he was an angel at home, and at school it was really challenging.
And you don't want to leave the teacher guessing, right? Because they're going to come up with their own narrative if you don't tell them what's actually going on. And we can't expect the kids to be able to say when they're having one of those difficult moments. So giving some context is massive for teachers. We need context. But you're also opening the door to having the teacher tell you more about what's going on at school, right? So it's making it more of a two-way street. And you could even say in that email or in that meeting, I really appreciate it when you send an email about what's going on. We can process that at home in a calm situation.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that is one thing. I was doing a workshop for Autism Ontario, and we were talking about with schools, and and seeing the good in our children. And how, for me, when we switched, my one son was having some very difficult time at school, and things needed to change. And we tried, I finally, like every day I was hearing what he couldn't do. He was being told what he couldn't do. Like we were always focusing on the bad. And finally I said, he doesn't do well with this. And I said, let's focus on the good and start to grow the good. And we did. We really, every time he came home, he did this really great. So instead of me meeting the teachers at the end of the day and then telling me what he couldn't do that day, and, he hears it, and then it's, and so we switched the narrative. And now they could email me if something was going on, because I wanted to know the challenges. But when it came to him, I wanted to focus on the good so we could start building his capacity up. And when we were talking about that, one of the parents said, well, at school, that's all I hear is what my kid can't do. They every day, this, and so how can we help both teachers and parents switch the narrative so we're addressing the challenges, but also building upon the strengths?
Yeah, I think that is so personal. And it really depends on the family needs, the child's needs. But the only way you can address that and make sure that everyone knows what style of communication is necessary is by talking about it and saying it out loud and saying what you need. I mean, that's what it comes down to everything. Say what you need, right? So if that's what your child needs, say it immediately. You start the school year off with it. This is the communication style that works best for us. This is the information that he needs to hear to be successful in terms of your child. And this is what I need to hear in order to be able to, continue. That I was talking to a parent the other day, and she said, I don't need to hear every day that my autistic child isn't making eye contact. I know that. That's not helpful. So define what's helpful on both ends.
I think that is so key, is defining that communication, because it was the same with me. I was getting reports every day, and I said, let's just do it Fridays. Give me, tell me everything that happened. You can, put the dates on it, but just don't give it to me till Friday. Then I can have the weekend, and then we can deal with it. Because it was just bombarding, and it brings you down, hearing these challenges, and it can get overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that I think parents owning the voice and owning that, defining what would be best for them, and defining what works best for their kids right away too. So it's not the teachers stumbling and trying to figure it out, they're coming already with that knowledge of what the child used to.
And I think it's also important that, I often hear parents say, well, the school's not giving me enough communication. Well, they may be worried that you want to know every single minute of all day long. So again, it's kind of defining what is it that's important for you all to know. You're not expecting a full, 10-page report on the day. But what are the things that are key for you to know so you can bridge the gap when your child comes home? Maybe it is that one good thing, whatever it is, but kind of defining it, because I think I hear from teachers that they're afraid that parents are demanding, that's the word I often hear, too much communication. And what I try to help schools understand is, if you're not providing enough communication, you're building that person's anxiety. And if you are, they feel like maybe you're withholding and waiting to send it all at the end of the month of all of the horrible things that happened. So if you have to meet the person where they are, or you're creating undue anxiety when maybe there was no need for it.
And I think I like how you brought that up, because it is challenging, especially if your kids have challenges. I'm like, are they keeping up? How are they doing? Because I'm so used to monitoring how they're doing when I don't know until report cards come out. It can be, especially if they're not bringing homework home, so we're not seeing what they're doing, that unknown can be definitely challenging. And I'm just, as you were saying that, I'm like, maybe we can say, can they bring home their work in their book bag every 4 weeks or something?
Right,
We can actually
whatever it is, but or if the teacher can say to you, no news is good news, just so you know where they're at. But again, it all goes back to that open communication and back to, you have to create that relationship. So it takes some effort.
That is true. That is true. One of the things I wanted to ask, that was it, when you had said earlier about, trusting and that communication. Well, as a parent, sometimes, we go through the IEP meeting and then we have all these goals. And so often I hear parents saying, well, I don't think things are being carried over in the classroom.
Yeah.
And, that is sometimes challenging because I do know that. I mean, I've had that happen to me where I'm thinking, we're talking about it in the meeting, I'm thinking it's being addressed at school, and then finding out 6 months later that nothing's been done. And so how can we prevent that? How can we work with schools with that, and make sure everyone's on the same page?
Yeah, I would not leave the IEP meeting without knowing what the time frame is for communication, or what's going to be done by which point. And then the other thing I tell parents to do, if the school's not already doing this, which they should, but if they're not, when you leave, go home and write an email, kind of a summary of your meeting. This is what I heard in the meeting. Is this what you heard? Because you could be 10 people sitting at the same table and all take in different information. So writing back and saying, this is what I heard, and this is the things that I heard we were going to focus on, and I plan to check back with you, at the end of the month, whatever it is. And then you can say at the end, was there anything that I missed or any clarifications? So then everybody feels like, okay, we are on the same page with what was said at that meeting, and you're giving them another reminder. I'm going to be following up in 4 weeks' time to check on this progress.
Okay. All right. I like that. Having that defined to make sure everyone's still fresh, after the meeting of what we talked about, even afterwards, to check up. I really like that.
Yeah.
The other thing I find sometimes, schools, and especially now, sometimes, at least in some states, they're having parents go outside for therapy because there's just not enough therapists within the school system to do some of the support that the kids need. And I know as an occupational therapist, both working in the school system and private clinics on both sides, the amount of support I can do and skill training is very different in a school setting than in a clinical setting. And so I think one thing too as parents to know is, even though, we're coming to the school and the school is helping, there's always more that I feel like we can supplement at home that will just benefit the child. Yeah. Without, because I think that's hard too, is some parents feel like, okay, the school's dealing with it, they're going to help them with the reading and dyslexia, but there may be more, because I feel our kids that have some of these developmental challenges, there's a lot more that needs done than schools can do. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Your perspective?
Yeah, one of the other arm of my business is working with schools and helping them figure out how to track progress over time. And one of the parts of that is having outside therapists and the people in the school working on the same platform, sharing goals and progress all in the same place. Because so often I see an outside speech therapist or OT or PT, whatever it is, they've got their great goals that they're working on, wonderful strategies that never get translated into school. And it's a huge waste and a complete loss, honestly. So if we could have a place where in the school, all of those goals are in the same place. If you have an outside OT, try to get that person to come to the IEP meeting and get those goals on the IEP. because in that way, everybody knows what's going on and you're all on the same page then. And it's a reminder, oh yeah, there might be some strategies the OT could recommend for XYZ, because they're a resource.
Yeah, definitely. And even if they can't come, they can bring an updated treatment plan, or they can bring the evaluation, they can bring the documentation there to help the school.
Right.
Have you ever seen the schools say, because I mean, there have been some schools that, especially international schools that we've been, that just don't have that support.
Yeah.
And, it's okay. I think sometimes parents feel like if the school can't provide it, and we sometimes, and then we have to go seek it outside, that I think that's okay. I think sometimes we feel like the school should be equipped sometimes to handle the educational challenges, but knowing that that's not always the case.
Yeah, it's definitely not. And there are lots of locations that don't have local providers. And one of the good things about COVID, I can count them on one hand, I think, but one of the good ones is that there are so many more remote therapies that are going on. The Linden Global Group in Berlin is a fabulous resource. Tracy Ellis's group, IDS in Boston, is wonderful. And so there's all this new research too that says that remote testing is actually more valid than anyone ever thought. But on top of that, the therapies can happen remotely. So if you don't have those services locally, the options now are way better than they were probably even just 5 years ago.
That is so nice how it's expanded, where we can access these services. And there's some programs too that intertwine that we don't even think about with educational goals, that really can help the kids organize themselves in the school, that may be a service outside that the school may not know about. So I think we still, as parents, have to be aware that don't leave it all up to the school to figure out how to help the kids, because I know, working with families, the kids that have done the best are when the support's coming both from the school and from home, because it really is a combination. We can't always just rely on the school. The school's going to do their best, but we do want to make sure we have both sides supporting. This has been so valuable. I'm trying to think, what I'm doing really as we're talking is thinking of every comment any parent has ever had, or I have had, as far as struggling when working with this school. So I'm trying to think if there's any other.
The one thing that came back up to my mind is, while we were talking about the actual IEP meeting, because that's kind of like the culmination of everything all year long, and you want to make sure you do it right and everybody's feeling good. But there's often something you have to sign at the end. And if you haven't been able to take everything in because of emotions, using totally different words than you're used to hearing, or new diagnoses being presented, it's okay to ask for more time. It's absolutely okay. Never feel pressured into doing anything or agreeing to anything at that point. It's always okay to take it away, read it on your own again, and then say, all right, now I understand what this is, or ask for clarification a week later. It's not a bad thing to say. This was an educational psychology report we went through. I don't have a PhD in this. Can I ask a few questions? No one's going to be offended at all. So it's okay to ask those questions, ask for more time.
I like that. Thank you. No, that is very key to know. And we give all that information within an hour. That is a lot. It would almost be nicer if we could give the evaluations beforehand to digest, and then come to the meeting and talk about the results, rather than having it all at once.
Right. Or at least an evaluation with an index, or a little dictionary at the end, or some links to help us understand these parts of it. Because the first time you're exposed to one of these, which is most parents the first time, and then you only have one of these every 3 years, you're not going to remember all of that lingo in between. It's new every time. And I think those of us that are in that world all the time, we forget that this isn't common knowledge. We absolutely forget. And it's okay in the middle of a meeting too, to just stop them and say, hey, I didn't get that. Can you please explain that again? Or what does that really mean in layman's terms, please? Because we forget as the practitioners that we need to use real language.
Yeah, because for us, it is real language when we're doing it every day and not realizing. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, parents definitely need to know, stop at any time and have things clarified.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And I just want to share a little story because I think this may help some parents. When my son, we were moving from Argentina to Romania, and he was going from kindergarten to first grade. And he always loved school, but regulation and, it was challenging attention. He had some dyslexia and had some other challenges. And the curriculums were very different from one school to the other. And when we had gone to this, it was a new country, new school, and he was just had a terrible time in first grade and just really was falling down, wasn't doing well, almost like falling asleep because he was just mentally fatigued by noon. And his motivation, his perception of himself, everything was going down. And I was really concerned. And I knew he needed an aid. I knew he needed this, but the school couldn't do it. And it was really, really challenging. And it came to a point where I think sometimes too with parents, like I ended up pulling him out because I said, I can't have his self-esteem. And there wasn't any support that they said we can't support him, and so I'm like, well, something has to be done. So we ended up pulling him out. I did homeschool, terrible homeschool teacher, let me just say, but he has fond memories of it. So maybe I did something right. But the two of us with, attention problems, we were just bouncing off the walls, but it was okay. But I knew it couldn't keep going because that's just, I was not a good homeroom teacher. And so I went back to the school and I had a meeting with them and I said, I need him back in, but we need to have it where he gets the support. I do believe he can do great things with the right support. And they were very reluctant to take him back. And I said, please, let's get an aid. Let's see, let's give him a chance. And they did. They said, okay, we'll give them a chance. And they, like I said, they were really, and it was a trial. They were not accepting him for the whole year, but I had confidence with the support he would do well. Well, I will tell you, second grade and third grade, his teachers, he was the favorite in that class. He excelled. He did so well. His confidence went up because he had that right type of support. And I think parents, what I want people to get from that story is, one, don't give up, just because the school maybe at that time doesn't have the resources. Try again. Or, maybe if you feel homeschooling, for some kids it is better. I'm not saying, but, and when I came back with the school, I came back and saying, I wasn't angry saying you failed my child the first year. I didn't bring that into the table. How can I help my child? Because so I think that key part is that communication, that trusting that the school and trying to work with them and get what's best for your child, because, kids with the right type of support can really do so much better. And I think that's, so I just wanted to share that story just for parents who are struggling with that, and for teachers too, to see that, just because a child's struggling with one setting with just a little bit of different help, they can just blossom. So yeah, just want to share that little story.
I love it.
Yeah. So if there's anything that you want to, I think we covered so many amazing tips for parents. From so many different sides. And I love the cookies. I'm going to, and I've had people do that and I never realized that thinking back now that, that is such a great idea, bringing the cookies.
Bringing the
also,
cookies and telling them how you're feeling while they are eating your cookies.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you, April. You have been such a wealth of knowledge and information. And now, as far as what you offer to support families, I want to just make sure I'm going to touch upon that because I think it's such a great resource having you. Can you just please tell us a little bit about how you work with parents and how you support parents
Sure.
and the children?
I help parents when they're moving to a new location, searching for a school. I read all the documentation. I interview past teachers and therapists about best strategies, and put that together in a learner profile. The reason for that is you're controlling the narrative when you're sending all that information to the new school. You're telling the school the key points about your child and not waiting for them to pick up the phone and talk to the last school. I know from being inside one of those schools that it doesn't always happen because there's so much to do. There's so much information. And sometimes you end up with a document that has 300 pages about a student. And I can almost guarantee you they're not reading the whole thing. And what we want to try to avoid is them saying, okay, this boy has inattentive ADHD. I had a student once that had that. That must be how he is in the classroom. We want to give the real picture. And that means being a bit proactive first and putting together that information before sending it off to school. So that's how I work with families.
I love that because as a person on the other side who's going through not one as a parent with evals from 10 years ago and all this information, I love that how you just pull out the key points. So then those key points aren't being lost in all of the other data.
Yeah, the other piece is that it's done by a third party. It's written in teacher language, number 2. And then the school thinks, okay, then the parent bias is taken out of the equation. So it kind of levels the playing field a little bit more.
I like that too. Now, when you're coming, because I know for us, sometimes we're coming from one IEP to another, but sometimes the IEP, from where it was written, the child's changed a lot. So do you take the perception not only of the teachers and the child, but also the parents too, as far as
parents, child, teachers, and it's got to be all in there because we're creating the full picture of a student. You are not passing on a grade report, which what's a 4 or a 6 or a B or who knows what that means. And you're really getting at the heart of what a student needs to be successful. So when they are in school on day 1, real supports can be in place.
And I like that too, because I noticed my kids where they've been in 4, 5, I don't know, a lot of different schools in their history since we do move around a lot. In the last school, I noticed their accommodations page. It was almost like any child could have this accommodations. Like it really wasn't, it was a cut and paste. It really, I felt, didn't define exactly what they needed. And it sounds like from your approach, having you involved in there, that really, you don't get that cookie cutter accommodations. It's very specific to that child, which is wonderful.
Yeah, that's the point. Exactly. So, yeah, there's parents all over the place. But I don't apply for schools for parents. That's something that parents do directly with the school. I just help in the preparation of getting ready to go and speak with the schools.
Nice. Oh, well, what a wonderful resource. Thank you so much, April, for spending time answering questions. I feel like you have shared so many valuable tips that will help a lot of parents out there.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I enjoyed it.
Thank you, April.